Hello, I'm Nathen Harvey. Welcome to GitCon. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I lead up DORA at Google Cloud, and I want to take you on a journey today where we're going to talk about how you and your teams can get better at getting better. We'll use the research-backed approach to measuring and improving your technology-driven team. We will explore a brief history of DORA. We'll talk about the rapid adoption and widespread implications of AI in software development. We'll talk about how AI can boost productivity and enhance developer experience. We'll talk about how to build trust in AI systems and address potential challenges. And we'll close out with the importance of a proactive AI strategy for your future success. Let's start with a little bit of history about DORA. We are so excited this year to have published our 10th annual report. We've learned a lot over the past decade, but we're even more excited about the decade ahead, together with you. Let's take a brief look at the history. In 2014, we saw that there was growing momentum of the DevOps movement, and so we investigated. We found a number of really interesting things, like job satisfaction being the #1 predictor of organizational performance. We also saw that teams that were delivering software the best, they were deploying code 30 times more likely with 50% fewer failures. And those same teams realized a 50% higher market capitalization growth over the prior 3 years. In 2015, we dug into lean management and continuous delivery practices. We also found that burnout can be prevented, and the capabilities and practices that we were looking into, they could help. In 2016, we encouraged teams to invest in collaboration. In fact, we saw that high-performing organizations and employees within those organizations were 2.2 times more likely to recommend their organization as a great place to work, and 1.8 times more likely to recommend their specific team. In 2017, we looked at the importance of transformational leadership and automation. We saw great impacts from having a loosely coupled architecture and how lean product management can really drive organizational performance. In 2018, it was clear that software delivery performance was a key differentiator. We saw a strong correlation between high software delivery and operational performance and overall organizational performance. We also saw some really interesting things about the cloud. In fact, we saw that teams that adopt the 5 characteristics of cloud, these essential characteristics, they were 23 times more likely to be elite performers. And in 2019, DORA's software delivery metrics, those 4 keys, had become industry standard. We saw that high-performing engineers were 1.5 times more likely to have easy-to-use tools. In 2021, we invited our site reliability engineering friends to the party. That's right, DORA looked into the practices and capabilities around SRE. We found that the things that we looked at SRE and the things that we traditionally think of as DevOps, these 2 practices and these 2 approaches were very highly complementary. We also found that good internal documentation has a tremendous impact on a team's ability to successfully implement a lot of the technical practices that we talked about. We also found that inclusive teams with a generative culture were less prone to burnout during the pandemic. In 2022, we dug into security practices. We found that software quality is marked by how easily an organization can safely and consistently change that software. And when it comes to security, we found that culture was the #1 predictor of an organization's application security practices. In 2023, we looked at a user-centric approach. We found that teams that prioritize understanding and meeting user needs demonstrate improved performance. We also saw that you and your team can unlock software delivery performance with faster code reviews. And that brings us to 2024, the era of AI. I think it would be very difficult to convince anyone that AI is not here on the scene having dramatic impacts today. We found in our research that most developers are using AI for core work, boosting their productivity. But we also found that it is really, really important that teams continue to be relentlessly user-centric. So Let's dig into some of those AI findings this year. And before we get there, I'll just mention that DORA first looked into artificial intelligence during our 2023 research cycle. But as the use of AI in the professional development work moves rapidly from the fringes into ubiquity, we believe this year's report represents an important moment in time, an important opportunity to assess the adoption, the use, and the attitudes and the impact of artificial intelligence. We are certainly at a critical inflection point for the industry. So this year, we looked deeply into AI. We looked at the adoption of AI, the perceptions of AI, and how AI is being incorporated into the daily work of developers and into applications. AI adoption is growing, with a majority of respondents reporting that their organizations are shifting priorities to incorporate AI into their applications and services. Raise your hand if your organization has started prioritizing AI. Well, we wanted to understand why, and we supplemented this year's survey with some deep interviews that we had some qualitative researchers looking into. These conversations helped us really round out our perspective and helped contextualize some of the data that we got from our survey. We found that competitive pressures, the need to keep up with the industry, were two of the largest drivers of adoption and prioritization. We also see that a large majority of our respondents are saying that they are relying, at least in part, on AI for one or more of their daily professional responsibilities, with the most common use cases for AI in software development work being writing code and summarizing information. These are big parts of a daily software engineer's life. Productivity has also started to improve. In fact, over 70% of our respondents reported positive productivity gains, with more than a third reporting either moderate or extreme productivity increases. Most respondents, though, have some trust in AI code, but almost 40% reported little or no trust in AI code. With all this AI adoption happening, we also want to understand what are the impacts of introducing AI into the daily work of software developers and others in our technically driven organizations. Well, what we can see here is that AI is associated with improvements to flow, job satisfaction, and productivity. That's really great. Oh, what is flow? Just by the way, flow is, you know what flow is. It's that state where you're working on something and everything around you seems to melt away. Time fades away. You're so focused on the task. You feel really, really productive. And of course, flow and job satisfaction and productivity, these are all highly correlated elements. But what we see is that with further AI adoption, all of these topics are improving. You get better flow, better job satisfaction, and better productivity. There's an interesting side effect, though. The time doing toilsome work and burnout are largely neutral, while there seems to be less time doing valuable work as the adoption of AI increases. Now, this is really interesting. Flow and job satisfaction and productivity are increasing, but you're spending less time on valuable work? Well, this may come down to what individuals in our survey deem as valuable work. AI assisting developers with valuable tasks might be helping them accomplish those tasks faster. In other words, it might expedite the realization of that value. But what do you do with that extra time and capacity? Well, perhaps you're like me and you take that extra capacity and you use it for learning something new, or maybe catching up on email, or maybe catching up with an office mate. None of these things are necessarily considered valuable work. So AI may be giving us some additional time to work on other things that don't drive immediate value. Here's a visualization of what that might look like. AI is kind of helping us with some of that valuable work, but remember, the toilsome work didn't actually get changed at all. We're doing about the same amount of toil. So AI hasn't really yet cracked the code of helping us avoid some of the drudgery. Maybe that's meetings or bureaucracy or other toilsome tasks. So This might be a thing for you and your team to think about. As you're adopting more and more AI, how can you use it to help eliminate some of those toilsome tasks so that you have even more capacity to deliver more value to your users? Let's look at some other impacts of AI. It's obviously removing obstacles in the developer workflow. In fact, what we're seeing are some pretty good increases in things like documentation quality, code review speed, and even some mild improvements in approval speed and code complexity. The impact on technical debt looks kind of small, maybe leaning a little bit negative, but it's really hard to say with the data that we've collected what the true impact on technical debt will be. Well, why do all of these things matter? Flow and productivity and documentation quality and code approval speed. Well, I think all of these things come down to how they help with software delivery performance. And before we just talk about that, I want to dig in a little bit on how we measure software delivery performance. DORA has these 4 measures that we use to help us understand the power of software delivery performance. We break software delivery performance from a concept down into 2 different factors. One of the factors is the throughput that you're able to get through your system. How quickly can you deliver change? But the other factor is the stability of those changes. As you ship out changes, are they working when they land in production? Now, to measure these 2 factors, this year we used a collection of 5 different metrics. We'll start with the metrics used for software delivery throughput. And for that, we use the change lead time, which is a measure of how long does it take for a change to go from committed to the version control system all the way through to production, where your end users can interact with it. Next, we wanted to understand how frequently are you updating production, and if something goes wrong, how long does it take you to recover when something goes wrong, that failed deployment recovery time. So these are 3 measures of throughput. On the stability side, we have 2 additional measures. The first is the change failure rate. And this is a measure of how frequently, when you do push to production, does that cause an issue? We have to roll back that change or push forward a hot fix. And finally, the rework rate, because when you do have to push forward a hot fix or roll back that change, your team is likely taking on some additional rework. Now, when we look across our survey data and all of our respondents, what do we see? Well, the numbers here are pretty dramatic. The top performers, the best of the best, when compared to the lowest performers, those performers with the most opportunity to improve, we see huge differences. Those elite performers are deploying 182 times more frequently with 127 times shorter lead time. And they're able to recover from failed deployments 2,293 times faster. Whoa, these numbers are huge. But why do they matter? Why do these metrics actually matter? Well, what our research has shown us is that software delivery performance, along with the reliability of systems we're running, are both predictive of organizational performance and well-being of the people on the team. Outcomes that we all care about. Now, when it comes to organizational performance, we look at things like revenue and customer satisfaction and the quality of the products and services that you're delivering. And when it comes to the well-being, we're looking at things like burnout and job satisfaction, things along those lines. And so when we have better software delivery and reliability performance, we see these outcomes improving as well. So that's really great. These measures can serve as a leading indicator for those particular outcomes. They also serve as a lagging indicator for how our teams are able to develop and deliver software. And what we know from our research is that the way to improve these metrics is by having these types of capabilities within your organization. Capabilities like a climate for learning and fast flow and fast feedback. In fact, we can expand on these categories to get more specific too. You can see here things like version control and continuous integration and streamlined approval processes and having a generative organizational culture. All of these are predictive of better software delivery performance and then predictive of better outcomes. So, as we saw earlier, AI is helping with things like flow and job satisfaction and productivity. These are all predictors of improved software delivery and reliability performance. So are things like documentation quality and code review speed. All of these things have been shown to help with software delivery performance, which makes this next finding rather surprising. You see, interestingly, we see that an increase in AI adoption is harming overall software delivery performance. In fact, you could see here on this slide that software delivery throughput is dropping down a little bit, while the harm seems to be worse for software delivery stability. That's dropping over 7%. This may be an indicator of the quality of changes that AI is generating. So drawing from our prior year's findings, we hypothesize that the fundamental shift that AI has produced in terms of respondent productivity and code generation and speed may have caused the field to have forgotten one of DORA's basic principles, the importance of small batch sizes. You see, in order to improve software delivery performance metrics, what we've seen in our data and through our experience over the years is that one of the best ways to get there is to ship smaller changes. Smaller changes that are always moving through your pipeline are easier to reason about. And when something goes wrong, it's easier to correct that thing. We can get back to a good working state much, much faster. Considering all of this, perhaps AI is helping us generate more code, and we're using that code and shipping larger changes through our pipeline. We know that larger changes are less likely to be stable. They're usually harder to get through the pipeline. They move through that pipeline slower. So there could be an interesting interplay here where AI is helping us create more code, which is resulting in larger change sets, which is detrimental to our software delivery performance. We don't know from our data that that is the case, but I would say it's a caution for you and your team as you adopt more and more artificial intelligence capabilities. So, how can you adopt those AI capabilities and really help your teams improve? Well, I've got a couple of ideas for you, a couple of suggestions to help get you started. The first is to establish a policy about acceptable generative AI use within your organization. You see, if we go back to that finding around trust, we have many developers, many people in technology-driven teams who are not trusting the output of AI. And we suspect that even then, they are not sure what policies are in place within their organization. Are you allowed to use AI? What safeguards has the organization put in place to keep your IP protected? So it is really important that your organization start by coming up with a clear, consistent policy on how, where, when you and your teams can use generative AI, under what conditions, in what circumstances, and be very clear about that so that everyone knows. Second, we encourage you to double down on high quality, fast feedback. Every time we write a line of software, we're running a little experiment. Is this line of software going to do what we expect it to do? Well, we write lots of lines of code, lots of software, and we expect to ship those out to our users. Well, it's better if we can get feedback on those changes before we put them in front of users. Feedback through the form of automated testing and code reviews, things along these lines. Let's utilize AI to help us double down on our ability to get fast, high-quality feedback. Next, let's make sure that we're providing opportunities for developers to get exposure to AI. When it comes to trust and use tend to be self-fulfilling, or they create a virtuous cycle. The more I use something, the more I trust it. The more I trust that thing, the more I use it. And in fact, that usage can also help me understand better how and where the system might let me down, where the boundaries of what the system can provide to me are. But also, through additional use, I'm going to learn better how to interact with that system. Maybe write better prompts, provide additional context to the AI. This use begets better trust and begets further use and hopefully better outcomes. So make sure that you're providing opportunities for developers to get that exposure to generative AI and potentially even layering in some training and learning activities so that they can start to improve their own interactions with AI. Next, I want to encourage you to encourage the use of AI, but don't force it. We know this through many, many years of research and experience that when you try to force change on people, people are going to be very resistant to that change. We want to encourage the use of these new practices and these new technologies, but we certainly can't force that on individuals. And finally, let's help developers and ourselves think beyond automating their day-to-day work and envision what their future role might look like. We saw some concerns about the future of AI and its impacts on people's careers and society. We want to make sure that we're helping developers reimagine what is their role with the assistance of AI. AI can be such a strong partner in a lot of the activities that we do. We want to use it to eliminate toil and to allow us more time to do that creative work, of course. But let's think beyond that. What are the even more creative ways that we can use AI and how we might use it as a partner in our journey to deliver the very best for our customers? I'll close out with a couple of final thoughts, and I want to thank you for coming along to this keynote. I hope that you found some ideas about how you can put AI to use within your team. This year's DORA report looks at more than just artificial intelligence, though. We also have deep dives into platform engineering and the developer experience. But don't take our research at face value. Our research is important, but I encourage you to replicate our findings. Replicate our findings by using our findings as hypotheses for your next experiments. You want to improve the way you and your team work? Take our findings and use those as a jumping off point to get started on the improvement work that you want to make. So learn more about how your team operates and identify areas for improvement, which may be inspired from our findings. And finally, we're talking about change. And change and improvement is hard. It's difficult work to do. And frankly, none of us can do it alone. So it is really exciting to be here at GitCon, where we can learn from each other. We can take insights from other presenters and other participants of this conference and put them into practice. Now, when it comes to not being able to do this alone, I also want to introduce you to the DORA community. The DORA community is filled with thousands of practitioners and leaders and researchers from around the world that are coming together to understand ways of putting this research into practice. I invite you to join us at dora.community. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't recommend that you download and read this year's report. You can get to it right here, dora.dev/DORA Report 2024, or by following that QR code. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that you enjoy the rest of GitCon. Take care.